Hello and welcome. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story, our digital platform that brings you some of the biggest newsmakers from across the world. Now, through the pandemic, it has been virtually a surreal time, pun fully intended. But in these strange new virtual realities that have come to define our lives, could there be an opportunity? Is there a way to actually convert this moment into an opportunity? Is there a way to actually win in the digital age? Well, our newsmaker today, Nitin Seth, believes that there is. Let's take a look at his new book, just out, that talks about winning in the digital age. This is a perspective of someone who's won pretty much at whatever he has done in his life. So he certainly knows what he's talking about. And there is book, Winning in the Digital Age, which speaks about how these very difficult times are in fact potentially an opportunity. And the digital age is here to stay, whether we like it or we don't. But I think what Mr. Seth is arguing is that we should actually like it, because in many ways, it provides a level playing field even to the small players. Welcome, Nitin, and I can see that it's morning where you are on the East Coast of the United States of America. I was reading somewhere that this book was not written in response to the highly sort of virtual reality that COVID has imposed on us. This is something you saw coming anyway. Talk a little bit about how the idea of this book was born.
Hi, Barkha. Very nice to be talking to you. This book has been in works for a while, for almost 10 years, because, digital age is certainly something which COVID has accelerated, Barkha, but, it has been happening. The World Economic Forum officially calls the fourth industrial, age as the digital age. Digital is how we pretty much is defining our lives, how we consume various products and services, how we interact. Going to movies is not going to the theater, is going to Netflix. Shopping is not, is going to Amazon or Flipkart. So, we know that, it is all aspects of our life. And what has always intrigued me is that, there is such a great opportunity. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being spent globally on digital. Yeah, it's a massive number. So, I think the count is next 3 years, $7 trillion are going to be spent on digital. That's a massive number, more than 2 times India's GDP.
Yeah.
But equally, the very stark statistic is that 70% of digital initiatives do not realize their potential. And I've always been, it has really bothered me because just think about it, $5 trillion will go waste. And that's something which is always, that has been my reason for writing the book, that, hey, if we can get a very different success rate with digital, then won't that be such an amazing thing for everybody, for our businesses, for individuals, for our society. And that really, this 70% failure rate is really, my kind of big thing, why I felt that.
Yeah, so two data points really leap out there. One is that 70% of digital entities, even though they're not short of investment, do actually close, don't actually take off. And the $7 trillion figure that you say that the world is going to be spending on digital transformation. How unprepared do you find legacy companies for this new digital age?
I think legacy companies are now aware, Barkha, but they have a hard task. Yeah? And the hard task is not just about technology. See, at least the larger companies, they have figured out, about, that, okay, it's modern technology, we have to spend on it. So, JP Morgan probably spends, its tech budget is probably more than what the total investment into all of fintechs. Yeah. So, the large companies are not short of spending money, but to succeed in digital, there is a lot more that goes into it than technology. It is fundamentally a business change. It is also, and very importantly, an organization change. It needs a new culture. It needs a new culture, which is where speed is king. You move very fast, where you're not structured into your functional silos, but which is truly customer centric. These are easier said than done. So what it takes to succeed in digital, there are many things that go into it, and legacy companies have a hard task. But at the same time, what I also want to say is that we are still in relatively early stages of digital, Barkha. So think of it as a 5 test match series. I'll take a cricket analogy. We are still, I think, at lunch of day one of the first test match. Yeah, so already a lot of action has happened. At this stage, it seems that the digital natives like the Amazon and Google and so on are way ahead. But I think it is, there is still a lot to play out, and there is still, the legacy companies do have a number of advantages, which I think will come into play as this test match series goes on.
I mean, you're obviously a big cricket lover, digital or no digital, because I've heard conversations with you, even otherwise, where you keep drawing these parallels, even with the Indian cricket team. And you talk about the digital world, altering our reality in the same way as the composition, the background of our cricket players, some of our best athletes has altered. So speak a little bit about that. What can we, finding our way in this digital age, learn from India's cricket team?
Yeah, that's a great prompt, Barkha. So the big thing about digital and why I feel so excited on what it means for India in particular is that digital is all about democratizing access. It's all about democratizing access. So whether it is knowledge, technology, all of that is now getting democratized. So it is not just about that you go to the IITs or IIMs and you get the best education. You could be in Kurnool, or you could be in Hisar, you could be in Navsari, wherever, and on your mobile phone you will have access to the latest content. Yeah. So I think that democratization of access for a country like ours is such a humongous opportunity. And you add to that the fact that generally the entry barrier for doing business or for doing anything is much lower in the digital age. Yeah. And plus, there is so much change happening, there is so much technology change. So the existing kind of basis to win, or the scale benefits are probably not there, or probably they're at disadvantage. Yeah. So it really means that we are ripe for unleashing an entrepreneurial revolution. And I believe that is really going to come from our smaller towns. And this is really the opportunity for the Bharat that is India, I feel. Yeah, and I think that's where it reflects, the composition of the Indian cricket team. That if you look 10 years back, the Indian team was all Mumbai club, Delhi,
Yeah.
Chennai, Bangalore, four metros. And now you look at it, where does Dhoni come from? It's all the smaller, towns. That's the real Bharat, coming to the fore. And I think cricket, in many ways, cricket and Bollywood are like, lead, where India goes. And I think that is the digital opportunity.
That's very interesting. Cricket as a metaphor for the democratization, even of India, whether it's in any field. You've picked up cricket; it actually applies across the board. But here's my question to you: we still also live in an age of big tech, where the big four have often been interrogated by the U.S. Congress, for example, where you are. What happens to the small guys given the dominance of big tech? Look at how our lives came to a standstill when Facebook, for example, had its outage, right? So, where do you see this opportunity for individuals, smaller players, given that this space is so dominated by big tech?
Yeah, the one of the aspects of the digital age, or really the world we are in, very complex world. I often like to use this word VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, is duality. That
Yeah.
we are in this complex world, where you have a number of paradoxes, and those paradoxes coexist. So both
Yeah.
are true. So as you said, we are in the world of big tech, and the power the big four have, is unprecedented. After maybe the East India Company or something, one or few enterprises, really have few enterprises had this level of power. But at the same time, it is much easier to get started. It is much easier to set up a business. Yeah. So both of those aspects are true. There is, the infrastructure, the guardrails of the digital economy are heavily, these big four have a huge role to play. But end of the day, how are they also making money? Yeah. They make
Yeah.
money, when there are many digital enterprises. yeah, who advertise on a Google, or who are so both are true. The reality of big tech is true, and I think that's something which there is it's a much bigger conversation that needs to be had there. But at the same time, it is also the age of abundance. It is also an era where the entry barriers are low, and it is so easy to now get going and set up your business. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and this is the aspect which I would really focus on.
That's so interesting that you should say this, because this platform, Mojo Story, was born in the pandemic, and we saw an opportunity because, frankly, suddenly we were at the same level playing field as TV channels, my erstwhile medium, because everybody was online. Everybody was doing programs through streaming, through Zoom or Skype or the software we use, and it was suddenly an equal opportunity with at a fraction of the cost. So I totally see what you're saying, but I want to go back to the cover of your book. It's called Winning in the Digital Age, and the corollary would be who loses in the digital age. And what makes you lose in the digital age? Because let's remember that other data point about the 70% companies that actually fold. They start with a bang and they end with a whimper. What makes you fail in the digital age?
There are many things that go into it, Barkha, but I would say the most important thing is your ability to adapt. Yeah, because the digital age is it's all about the velocity of change, and the velocity of change is unprecedented. So whether you look at a business cycle, or within a business cycle you look at product cycles, everything is getting crunched. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything is getting crunched. So you have to move very fast, and you have to adapt. And that is where you had asked the point about legacy companies. I think they have a huge risk if they do not adapt. And if you step up, I think existing economies have also a huge challenge. Yeah. So if you again go back to history and you look at successive eras of industrial revolution, each new age of industrial revolution has heralded a new world order. Yeah. So pre the first industrial revolution, you had India and China dominating, and then
Yeah.
Europe came up, and then after the second and third industrial revolution, US really came to the fore. And I really think that at a more macro level, this the fourth industrial revolution, the digital age, is also an opportunity for new economies to come in, and China and India are the two that are best placed. So I think this is going to be a change at multiple levels. It is at the enterprise level, it is at the individual level, but I think it is also at a more macro level of what societies, what economies really make best use of this.
Aldous Huxley wrote a book back in the day called The Brave New World, but I
Yeah.
literally feel we're entering a brave new world that we don't fully understand. Let's take up something like, for example, the debate around cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and so on. Like, you're talking about economy that is not controlled by the state, the deregulated currency. It just strikes me as a key example of how technology is actually outpacing the mind. And I'm just wondering what you're really thrown by. I know you've written about winning, but in terms of your personal journey, what was that moment when you paused and you said, "Oh my God, I'm still doing things the old way. I've got to learn a new way of doing it." And I'm sure that was that moment when the idea for this book was born.
Yeah, no, that idea is very, very, or that movement is super clear for me, Barkha. So, I was at Fidelity, and I was leading global, strategy and transformation for Fidelity. All of Fidelity's business outside the US. And, we were all, required all the senior execs to go through, agile training. And the consultant said that, the, half life of any strategy now is like 6 months. Yeah. In 6 months, the basis, the assumptions for your strategy will change. And there I was sitting responsible for building strategy for the company, and I'd been doing strategy for 20 years with McKinsey. And that's the moment, Barkha, I really realized that, hey, in this world of such rapid change, where your core assumptions will not last beyond 6 months, the way we have thought about the world
Yeah.
is not just limiting, it's probably like a huge, we are doing a disservice. And that is what then made me say, okay, I am going to leave this. I am going to go at the edge of at the leading edge of technology. That's when I joined Flipkart, which was very different. After
Yeah.
20
Yeah.
years of McKinsey and Fidelity, that was the cutting edge of chaos. But I think it was that moment I realized very clearly that the world that I had known and I thought I was doing well in, that had completely changed.
So basically, one is to not be change averse, the other is to not be risk averse. But what did you have to unlearn? What did you have to actually unlearn the most?
See, I think that a lot of the fundamentals, Barkov, we have to unlearn, and that's a key point that I make in the book. That this 70% failure rate happens, not because you don't have good management teams, and they are they're of course tracking the market, but again I'll take a cricket analogy. Sorry for that. That
No, no, please. Yeah.
so it's like you have a great you have the number one test match team, yeah, and suddenly they are sent into like a T20 World Cup. Yeah, what will happen? Yeah, they will really struggle. Yeah, because it may appear like cricket. It's the same cricket team with 11 players and all of that, but it's a very different game, and that is the issue with digital. That fundamentals are very different. Are very different. So I'll just take one example. There are many things I can talk about, which is strategy. Yeah,
Yeah.
strategy to execution. Now, in the world that we grew up in, you first analyze any situation, then you figure out what you want to do, which is your strategy, then you make a plan, you execute on it. Yeah, now completely wrong in the digital age. Yeah, completely wrong in the digital age,
Why? Why? You
because
mean the chronology is all wrong?
the chronology is wrong, because the world is changing so fast. Yeah, it's like Muhammad Ali famously said that everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face, and in the digital age you get punched in the face all the time. So the reality, what works better in the digital age, is that you have a very light strategy,
Yeah.
and then you have a set of experiments that you want to do, and you just go ahead and execute on those experiments. Some will work, many will not work. Yeah, and you connect the dots. What works, you say, okay, this is what I'm doing more of. What doesn't work, you kill. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so it's a very recursive relationship between strategy and execution. Now, when we grew up and when I did my engineering, one of the key things I was taught was RFT, right first time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this digital age is anything but right first time. It is all about, hey, you try you don't know what is right. You don't know that. So don't even pretend. You don't even try. You just experiment, and then you this ability to learn very quickly from your experiments.
I was just going to ask you, as sort of, you went to an IIT and then an IIM, and there was a certain idea you had about structure, about management best principles. Did you have to junk all of them? And do you find yourself constantly having to unlearn, or do some core learnings remain just as true for the digital age as well?
Yeah, it's a great point. And again, duality. Yeah, so both are
Yeah.
true, actually. Both are true. So I have to constantly unlearn. And with this thing called success, your biggest challenge is hubris. Because the moment you have a little bit of success, you think, oh, I'm like King Kong. I can really know it all. In
Yeah.
which this VUCA world is very unforgiving. Is very
Yeah.
unforgiving. The moment you have this thing, it will you will like you will get killed. But at the same time, in a world which is constantly changing, it is important to ask yourself that, hey, what are some things that don't change? Yeah, because
Yeah.
that is also very important. And to
And what are those? And what are those? What doesn't change?
see, there are three things that I would call out. The first is this thing called problem solving. Which is your ability to make sense of any complex situation and to zone down on what really matters. And in this increasingly complex world, that ability to simplify and get down to the core is extraordinarily important. Perhaps when you look at problem solving, a lot of focus goes on to the analysis part. That whole problem identification, I think, is super critical. So that's one thing which doesn't change, becomes even more important. The second thing is what I call deliberate learning. That in a world which is very rapidly changing, and where Any specific skill or expertise is going to have a certain time stamp. The only way you can succeed is that if you're able to learn very quickly, and there, that's where I call it deliberate learning. That it's not like general knowledge that you learn at a superficial level. That doesn't really help, but the ability to go deep into something very quickly. And the third skill is the skill of human connection, of empathy, of relationships, because and I think that's again the duality, that in a world of bits and bytes and machines, that ability, how do you really get an advantage, because everybody has access to the same data, then
Yeah.
how do you differentiate so that intuition, and which then comes from interactions, I think is very, very important. And at digital
I
age
would
you can get very self-obsessed, so that ability to connect, I think, is the third thing, which to me is everlasting.
I was just going to say, I've heard you speak about that you know how when you first started out and people would tell you, listen, it's either what you know or who you know. You thought that that was a really sort of superficial way to look at life, but as you lived it, you realized that there was value in it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, I talk about this many times that when I started after MBA, my
Yeah.
first day at McKinsey, so the then managing partner of the India office said, "Hey, there are only two ways to succeed. That either you know something or you know someone." And I thought, "Oh man, this is like cheating." Of course, it has to be about knowing something. This knowing someone business seems like not right. But I was very naive. That as you go on, you realize that, hey, it is that you also get to know something by knowing someone. The whole act of also knowledge and problem solving is not a solitary reaper exercise. It happens we are fundamentally social animals, and I think as
Yeah.
we get to the digital age, that's something we have to be very, very thoughtful about, because some of the dynamics of the digital age, while it kind of encourages the social interaction and social media, you can also end up building a bubble around yourself, which one has to be.
And know how to talk to your phone, but not to a real person.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we have a bunch of questions. Let me take some of them, the ones I found interesting. We have Aruna Sharma, who says, I'd be interested to know the role of physical robotics for the common consumer in the next digital decade.
A great question, Aruna. I think it's going to be super important. This is the age of devices, Barkha. So the thing about the digital age is that it is about convergence of a lot of technologies. Yeah, it's not one technology. So it builds on the previous kind of generation, which was the information age. And what is now happening is that you have data, you have devices, you have bandwidth, you have computing power, all of this coming together. And Aruna, what you mentioned, the role of devices and of automation, I think that's going to be super critical. So autonomous cars is just one example of that.
Yeah.
But we are going to see more and more of that. And right now, we are talking a lot about artificial intelligence, but where we are going is this notion of AI plus IoT, Internet of Things. All the devices are going to become more and more intelligent, and again, 5G is going to really enable that. So again, the point is that it's like a convergence. It's like a convergence of a lot of things, and our lives are going to change in a very, very significant way. And digital is certainly not just about like social media and e-commerce platforms. So this whole um, brave new world you said of of intelligent devices that we are getting into, that really, to me, is the very, very
Let me ask you a question of my own. The very idea of cryptocurrency, what does that do to the power of a sovereign state? Because one of the things that a sovereign state does is to print and regulate currency, right? So if cryptocurrency becomes how uh, people do actually start living, I don't know how many years you'd give it when it becomes pretty common. What happens to the idea of the state, of the sovereign state?
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating question, because the fundamentals of cryptocurrency are actually very, very sound. Because it is about something which is ubiquitous, and it is about reducing transaction costs. So those fundamentals are very strong. Um, but look, we are also in this, again, the world of duality, where there are multiple forces at work, and many of those are opposing forces. So
Yeah.
we have technology, which and Tom Friedman, famously talked about the boundaryless world, and it is, technology creates the boundaryless world, but we are also in a world, where national interests and are also becoming, there are fortresses and silos, which are also continuing to come up. So there are technologies taking us in a certain direction.
Yeah.
The politics and the social aspects, may put some counterbalancing forces as well.
So one of the counterbalancing questions is, what are the educational implications of digital learning? And having reported this through the pandemic, in countries like India, the reality check comes from what we call the digital divide, the fact that only 11% of India has access to computing devices. I know that the small, in absolute numbers, we just so many people that that's still like sizable numbers, especially Indians who own smartphones and so on. But what happens to this digital divide in our kind of country?
See, two questions there. You talked about implications for
And
education.
that question was from Hani Vora Bhala. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and then about digital divide. See, I am extremely positive about both those aspects. Yeah, so education is going to get transformed. Yeah, so dramatically. I think the two sectors, which I feel over the next 5 years will see the biggest change, are education and healthcare. Yeah, with digital. So the whole concept. See, because what digital can really enable is that it can move you from the classroom, yeah, to more individualized, specific, customized, engagement. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it can reduce the cost of that delivery dramatically, and it can expand access, again, by an order of magnitude. There is a reason why firms like Byju's are valued at what they're valued. Yeah, because it is for that promise. Yeah. So and existing educational institutions have, once they're already caught into the paradigm of the classroom and the big campus, and with you have names on different buildings, and you have that
Yeah.
whole thing, it's very difficult for them to move away from that. Yeah, but digital is going to disrupt education massively, massively. Yeah.
And do you think that's a happy development? I mean, I know you're making the point about edu tech, but like what happens to kids in poorer, lower income groups who don't have either, good bandwidth or smartphones?
And that's my second point on digital divide. There is a digital divide, Barkha, but it is way more. It's way easier to bridge than the physical divide. Yeah. So if you look at the context of India now, the drop, the variation in education quality is so immense. You have the IITs and the AIMS and the IIMs at one end, but then the quality drops off massively. Yeah, and the vast majority of Indians do not have access to quality. Now, with digital, I think the digital divide will get bridged. I think it is much less of a divide than the divide in the real world. Yeah, in the real world, we already have the smartphone penetration. Yeah, and we have Aadhaar stack. That's one kind of amazing thing that India has done.
Yeah. Yeah.
We actually have the infrastructure for the digital age, which very few countries have invested in that particular fashion. So I actually feel that the foundations are there, yeah, bandwidth and so on. I feel very, very positive that this divide is not an issue, but it will actually become a huge opportunity for us. And maybe that's where the government needs to
Should
make.
focus.
Yeah.
Should focus. Actually, that's a great point. I hadn't thought of it like that. That, as gaps go, the digital gap is easier to bridge than, let's say, the gap in the quality of education that certain income groups can get over others. And it'll take less money actually to bridge the digital gap than to bridge, brick and mortar gaps in education. Sunita Saini has a question: how do we make sense of sense making in the digital world? Right? Like I think people are just bewildered, overwhelmed, confused. Also, interpersonal skills. You know, MBAs programs teach you a certain idea of leadership. What happens to leadership in the digital age?
Yeah, I know it's a big topic. It's a big topic, Barkha, and I think we're still learning about it. We're still learning about it. It's so easy to get lost in the digital world.
Yeah,
So easy, because what is happening is that you have this barrage of stimuli coming at you. There are just so many of those things that are being thrown at you, and you can get lost if you are engaging the world, from an external perspective. It can eat you up. Yeah, and that's where I believe that that whole traditional Indian notion of going within yourself, the inside out view of the world. You can call that spirituality, and I hesitate to use the word because it has got so many connotations. But I do strongly believe that to succeed, to make sense of this, of in this digital age, it is so important to kind of be able to step inside yourself, where you can find that quiet and you can find that peace, because that certainly gives you perspective. Because otherwise, at least I find that making perspective in the noise is very, very difficult. So again, I come
yeah.
back to duality, that this is the age of of a lot of noise, but going, that finding that quiet, you know
Yeah.
space within yourself, I think, is key to success.
So people understand the digital age in ways that make sense to them. So we actually have a question from a parent saying, how about the distractions that happen to the digital age? Kids aren't able to focus, they don't concentrate on studies. What are we supposed to do about that?
Yeah, you should. Yeah, I think this should certainly be a device of time. But I
Yeah.
would also say that we should teach meditation as an essential life skill to right at a very early age to all children. It is I just it is something which this the boardrooms in the United States are now discovering. Yeah, that's in the conversation here has certainly gone well beyond yoga to mindfulness. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's the now the key mandatory thing for any CEO here now. But what is mindfulness? It really comes from meditation and dhyan, which is what our country has pioneered. And I would say that it is an essential life skill that all we should teach to all children.
It's so interesting that you should use the word dhyan, which means thought. And I just saw this question pop up on the stream. Considering all these fast-paced changes, convergence and tech are taking over our lives, where will we be headed as humanity? Will we still think? And I think that fear that AI will take over our minds and worse, our souls and our heart, a lot of people fear that. How do you address that?
See, if we let it, if we stop thinking, then it will happen. Yeah, because as human beings, that is our primary skill. And I talked about problem solving, and I talked about the how important problem identification is. That is thinking. So that is still our core thing, and we have to make the space for it. If we let the digital
Yeah,
barrage overcome us, we will get overcome. Yeah.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
do want to make this point around AI, Barkha, because there is this, maybe fed by the media or kind of popular portrayal, this image of
I mean,
AI.
too many Hollywood films, right? Which
Yeah,
also,
that
yeah.
it is this notion of this sinister kind of thing, which is just going to eat up humans. See, the reality is very different. The reality is very different. In reality, what you have is more narrow AI, which are specific tasks, which where you are able to bring that adaptive, learning, capability of AI. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I very much foresee, the world I think that is going to evolve is very much, man plus machine,
yeah,
or AI plus human, as opposed to AI
sure.
versus human. I think it is very much going to be augmented intelligence. How we are able to. We should not be so underconfident of the human race. That
Yeah.
I think it is going to be very much an and.
Okay, I'm at the end, so let me ask you a last question. What will the future of work look like in the digital age? It's also an age that has been mediated and disrupted by the pandemic. It's taught us new models of work, and then there's the digitization of the workspace. What will the future of work look like?
Yeah, it's a big question, and but I think we don't know. I think it's still evolving. It is still evolving. Anybody who says that has the precise answer is not being honest. Yeah, that it is still very much evolving. Now, here is what we do know. Yeah, that with COVID, a lot of the assumptions around how work has happened, they have got completely challenged. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
because most businesses, and it's not just my business, which is a tech services business, we have been able to move almost 100% of our work and 100% of our revenues, remotely. Yeah, and if anything, the customer, the productivity and also the client feedback has been better. So wow,
hmm,
isn't that amazing? And we were able to reduce costs, because we did not have travel and we did not have the cost of the
yeah.
offices. Yeah. So you look at most companies, actually the profitability is looking better. But then the question also is that sustainable? And the answer there is,
And
sorry, go on.
yeah, no, I was keen to know your answer, but I was going to jump in and say that profits may have increased, but there's a psychological cost to not meeting
That
your
is the
colleagues, to
issue.
not getting into, and that's tougher to measure.
See, that is exactly the point. It's like mental fatigue. I
Yeah,
see it all the time, that because
yeah,
we normally don't talk about it. There isn't,
yeah,
it's difficult to measure. There isn't a KPI for it. But the mental fatigue is there, and it is playing out in different ways. The attrition levels across industries have increased. Yeah.
yeah,
There is something called offer to joining. You make, 10 offers. Earlier, if 8 people were to join, now it's maybe 4 or 5. So
yeah,
there is a lot of very strange behavior that is happening, and I think a lot of it gets down to mental fatigue. Yeah,
yeah,
there is also a second thing, that how do you build culture? Yeah, how do you and the culture happens through connections. It happens through those happy accidents. So my view is that we will end up having some kind of a hybrid model, that will evolve. But I think we are still learning. And in part, because of the very unpredictable nature of COVID. It's still, you can't say that we have still figured it out. We talk about
yeah,
AI, and we talk about constantly adaptive behaviors. COVID is AI. COVID is
yeah.
AI. It's constantly
That's so
adapting.
interesting.
So still a lot to think about. But I think in a positive way, COVID has helped us challenge and break many of our assumptions.
Yeah. Well, on a lighter note, one of our audience members said, so ultimately, like work life balance, we need a balance between digital and real, isn't it? To which I think Nitin's answer would be digital is real. It isn't digital and real, digital is real. Nitin's book, let's bring it up one more time. If you haven't seen it, pick up a copy. It's extremely interesting. There's never been a more timely book, Winning in the Digital Age. I'm sure, it's overwhelming to live in the world that we do, but there's no running away from it. There's no escaping it. The pandemic has accelerated, I think, what Nitin says was coming anyway, because remember, he thought of this book 10 years ago. All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you, Nitin. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Nitin Seth, CEO of Incedo, the author of Winning in the Digital Age. A pleasure having you on the platform. Take care and have a great day in Jersey or wherever it is that you are on the East Coast. Thanks, Nitin.
Thanks, Barkha. Bye for now.
Thanks. Take care. And it's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent